My name's Kevin Kinker. I'm the CEO of Kinker Consulting, and I've been in recruiting for the past 23 years.
I'm Natasha Kahimkar, CEO of Melita Advisors, and I've been in people talent in DEIB for over 25 years.
I'm Michael Case, and after 20 years, I've accepted that I'm a recruiter, and I will always be a recruiter.
I'm Matthew Caldwell, CEO of Rocket Power, and I've been in the recruiting world for over 25 years.
All right.
Sure. Yeah.
We all ready?
We have all had experience with different kinds of organizations, different stages, tech, biotech, whatever industries we've played in. I'd love to know from you, based on all the wisdom you have, what is the one missing ingredient in the companies that are not thriving?
I'm going to take the easiest one, the softball, and make it harder for y'all.
Thank you.
Alignment.
Alignment.
I mean, really starting at the top, aligning on business needs, and then disseminating that down to middle management to make sure that they're all in line with what we're trying to do, and then to the individual contributors and back up so that they're all just marching together. Oftentimes this happens with a lot of our clients where they don't realize the one thing that's keeping them from growing is the fact that they're just not all on the same page. And it seems so easy to figure out, but from the outside perspective, it's easy to see. Inside, maybe you think you're aligned, but you're not. So I think that's always where I see them starting to turn a corner. There are other things, but that's a big one.
I think related to that, I see companies that haven't really, they haven't codified their culture. They haven't understood what their mission is. They haven't understood what their values are. And they haven't used those in a way that can help the company. I've gone in and helped some companies create core values, and very late in the game. Series B, 100 people. Oh, now let's think about core values. And some of those didn't do well. And I can think of some companies that I worked with early at Rocket Power when I was kind of doing a little bit more than just recruiting, where 15, 20 people, and they're like, we need to figure out what our vision, our mission is, and our core values. And actually make them real, like not just words on a wall or on a cup or on something that they're actually using them for performance evaluation. They're using them to determine whether or not someone's going to be a hire or not a hire. Using them to determine whether or not some company they're working with is the type of company they want to work with. I can think of one company I worked with early where I can't remember the exact core value that they had, but there was a big contract that they were looking at that was going to be with the Defense Department, dealing with some things that were making military stuff, things that could kill people. And the company was going to be a bunch of money, but they said no because it didn't align with their values. And it didn't align with their mission and their vision. And so I think it's an interesting thing because I like to say that values are very organic. Like if you plant a cherry seed, you're not getting an apple tree, right? Your core values are part of who you are. Whoever you've hired early, those people and what they represent end up making a lot of what is your core values. But you can prune a tree to do certain things, and you can cut off the dead growth, and you can get rid of the suckers, and all these things you can do to make it healthy and to make it grow the way you want it to grow. I think companies that can figure that out early can really understand what their core values are, understand how to hire to that, and use those to kind of drive the organization and make really important, impactful decisions. I think they do well. And the ones that make it an afterthought, that's when it's a bit chaotic. That's when the hiring is all over the place. That's when their decision making is not always aligned. I don't think that they, to your point, get aligned on where they're going. They're just kind of running around trying to build stuff and break stuff.
Related to those two, something that, and it's also quite personal for me, is purpose. What's the point of the company? What are we trying to do? Why are we getting up every day? Why are we going and working so hard to do whatever it is we're doing? And I've had companies I've worked at where, the mission or the purpose wasn't that clear or wasn't that big of a deal maybe, and it was sort of just a job. And I've had other places. When I worked at Apple early on, we all knew why we were there. We just making these great products that people love. It's pretty simple. We like changing the world that much, but it was fun, and it was we love to see people enjoy our products. And I remember one time I asked we have a close family friend who's relatively senior now at Nintendo in Kyoto, and I was like, "What's the point of your company? Video games? What's the point of that?" And he just said "egao," which is Japanese for smile. That's the only point of their company. And I was like, you got me beat. Like that's amazing. Like what bigger purpose could there be? So for me, I think purpose is a big part of it.
It's so interesting because early, when I first moved to the Valley, the company I was working with was a public company. And a lot of the folks who were in executive roles had grown up with the organization. And there was no vision, mission, or values in place. What we were observing was a real shift. They had hired a lot of great new people, and they were really struggling with some of the core decisions about the company, where money was being spent, which departments were getting funding and which weren't, because it was very incongruent. Their experience was incongruent with what they thought was the focus of the company. And so we introduced vision, mission, values. I guess we were over a dozen years into the history of the company. It was fascinating. But I've also seen organizations that want to review their values or refresh them. Typically because there's some sort of disconnect that's happening between leaders or employees and the values that are currently in place. So I'd love to hear if you have had any experience with people feeling that incongruence and how that shows up.
You know, when I was at Apple, that came up, actually. Steve Jobs mentioned it on stage at one of our all hands. I remember his exact words were, if we had a mission statement on the wall, which we will never have, by the way, it would be something like this. But for all the early Apple folks, it was just internalized. The cultural norms and what we were doing was internalized. I wonder now, Apple's like 10 or 20 times the size of when I worked at it. I wonder if they've actually formalized that more now, because it's very hard to get, 100,000 people or whatever onto the same boat as it is like 3,000 people. So I wonder if your case as well, those early leaders, they kind of all probably just knew each other so well that they woke up knowing what to do. But for the newer folks, they had to do it, right?
Yeah, I think the piece, Matt, that you mentioned about making them come to life, that's the missing piece often in companies where they've got the values, but they don't think about how to make it operational. So what are the operating principles that you can use to assess and select people based on? But I wonder, where have you seen that sort of incongruence between individual people's purpose and values and the company's values?
So when I was at Instacart, we created core values. It was actually created before I got there, right before I got there. So I was early. I was first head of HR and recruiting there, and the group that put them together. I don't know the process that happened because it was before I was there, but they put it together. And one of the core values was humility. And I remember my job when we were hiring the executive team. The office we were at was right near Central Park in San Francisco, South Park in San Francisco, and I had to interview. I was like the first person that had to interview all the executives, and Apurva wanted me to focus on humility. He thought that was one of the things I could suss out on people, and I had a process. We didn't have any conference rooms, and so I would walk these people across the street, past a halfway house, and then into this coffee shop. And one of the things I did is just watch how they interacted with the people they're passing on the street, watch how they interact with the people at the coffee shop. There's a lot of tells that I would get about whether or not they had humility. That was a big thing that Apurva wanted me to spend time on. And it was something we were proud of early days. But then I remember we were about 350 people or so. And we were doing a refresh of our core values, and people were opposed to the humility core value. To them, it showed weakness. To them, it was not a good thing. And for me, my background, the way I am, I felt like humility is a powerful thing. And evidently the people that created the core values early also felt like it was a powerful thing. But the hires that we had made, and again, I was like mid-50s employee. We're now 300 more employees. Those extra employees and some of the people, I think some of the early 50 people have been gone. So we probably had 325-ish people that were hired after those core values were created. They did not align with humility. And I remember sitting in the back kind of like, what? And to me, it was just whatever. But it was clear, because one of the things we did is we went through a process. I've also seen companies fail by the leaders like, here's our core values. That's the worst way to do it. I remember working with a company one time and telling them the process, and they said, oh, we're going to do it. And they, over the weekend, the founder just created core values and pushed it up the whole company. I can tell you the stories about that. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. What we did right in Instacart, where we asked a lot of questions, we gathered a lot of information, we narrowed them down, we kept doing that, and it became clear people were opposed to humility, and so we changed. And I can't remember exactly what the way it settled, because it was like 2015. But it was abundantly clear that what served us at one point no longer served us, and we had to adjust. And I think that's an important thing that strong, good leaders do, is listen to your people and look at your culture, because again, it's an organic thing. And if it no longer organically serves the needs of the company and there's conflict there, trying to force that's going to be completely counterintuitive to what you're trying to accomplish by having core values.
I'll do a little bit of a different take on a core value of a company that was not a stated value of the company. I had a client a few years ago where, to be honest, I couldn't tell you all of their values, because the one that they emphasized really from the top down was hustle. And hustle to the point of, we're just going to kind of figure things out as we go, and we're going to make all these decisions. And it really came to a head when from the top they said we should hire 50 more engineers. And so at the time I was there consulting, and I brought in the engineering management and said, okay, we're going to hire 50 people, and let's talk about, what does that look like? What are we trying to accomplish? And the very first person said to me is, I didn't ask to hire anybody. And so collaboration amongst the groups just was completely absent. And that's what they were looking for. And it was a very uncomfortable situation for me, being that I went in there as a collaborator myself. And they treated me like the messenger that they wanted to shoot. They did not shoot me because I'm here today. But it helped me identify with the company where they were. Again, it kind of goes back to that alignment I talked back, and I don't mean to overemphasize that, but that the very top was just out of touch with the values of the people that they had hired. They all had hustle. But you need more than just that one value to be successful. And ultimately, I think they turned the corner. It happened to do with then hiring a very strong, experienced, seasoned, wise people person. And then that's where it started to turn. I could advise the CEO, which is where the problem started, and then start working to bring everybody into the fold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because a lot of companies, they'll say they have their values and they're very generic. In fact, you could probably find them on a lot of different websites. Or they just will adopt Amazon's values, or some of them at least, seem to be very popular, particularly among engineering leaders, from what I've seen. But the generic values it's sort of a check the box, right? We've got our company values, we're done. And that disconnect that happens is where people feel like, wait, I'm in the bizarro universe. You say these are your values, but these are actually your values. And that, I think, makes people feel very loose in the saddle. They don't necessarily feel like they should stay because it's not what they believed the organization was. I think the other thing that was interesting is, I think it was last year, McKinsey released some data on what drives people and why people will stay. And purpose was a big element. It was the number one element that came through, but purpose.
Higher than money. Where was money on that list? It was probably 3 or 4 or 5 down, right?
We can ask Auntie Google. We'll ask Auntie Google that question. But this idea of purpose being such a driver and motivator for people, and a reason why people stay, individuals coming in, especially people hired over the past 3 years where they may never have met somebody in person, or they may never have set foot in an office where there are other individuals from a company or a team. I'm curious in terms of purpose and what your purpose is, and what advice you have for people in terms of identifying what matters to them.
I guess I could start this one off.
Okay.
I mean, I think purpose is really important. At some point, kind of almost, I think of my company, and then I think of that client. There were times where the lack of understanding around what our purpose is, what our focus is, had the employees saying to me, like, what are we doing? Like, where are we going with this? And sometimes it, like, it happens because there's all sorts of business opportunities. You see them, you start going in this direction and that direction because you're maybe chasing the revenue a little bit, thinking that, I mean, as an entrepreneur, you kind of feel like you never say no initially, at least. But then when you go back, but the advantage is your employees want that. And so bringing it back to this is what we're doing allows them to focus their activities, their results on what they think matters to the company. And so a lot of times, despite my waywardness around being an entrepreneur and wanting to do this, continually bringing myself back to the purpose as well, so that my employees feel like, hey, we know where we're going. But I think, for founders and some executives, especially in our startup world, that's a hard thing to do. Our unfocusedness is part of our success.
Yeah, I think I can speak for me and Rocket Power. So I happen to love the work that we do, and it's related to what you do. But I've always been really, really passionate about the fact that successful organizations are built around people. And our jobs is to go help find the people, right? When I was in-house, or what I'm doing now with Rocket Power, and we have a tagline, people power business. And we also say that business powers people. And so when we talk about the purpose for Rocket Power, the purpose for Rocket Power is twofold. One, it's to help companies grow so they can build great products. And I can look back at all of our clients and like, there's some really cool companies that are doing some really cool things. And I can be like, we were there when? We were there when there were 8 people. And we helped them get to this. And we can take pride in the fact that we helped them achieve these goals. And so one of the things that we exist for is to help companies hire great people. But we also give our employees an opportunity to work on really cool projects and to help these companies power their business through the people that we help them bring on. So it's a little bit meta. But when we talk about trying to bring people in, we want people that are passionate about recruiting, that understand recruiting, and geek out on the fact that you're not going to be somebody who's going to work at some company for 5 years recruiting. You're going to work on a project for 6 months, maybe up to 18 months. I think our longest client was just a little over 2 years. And you're going to learn a lot about that, and then you're going to move on to your next challenge, and you're going to help this new company grow. And if they're geek out about recruiting, they geek out about the opportunity to work with really cool projects and with really cool companies, then we're giving them a bunch of opportunities, and then they are now powering our business. And so it's that tagline for us is something we use and we talk a lot about in the interview process all along the way, because it is for us, it is our purpose is to help companies grow, help these businesses achieve their goals. And if we do that well, one of our core values is everybody wins. Our clients win, Rocket Power wins, and most importantly, our team wins. So, I mean, it's a big thing for us. I could talk for a while about it.
And obviously put a lot of thought into it, right? And it's probably evolved over the years, but we meet a lot of companies where they just they haven't put the thought in, right? Or they've gone and got the outside consultant who comes in and says, well, here's some values for you, right?
Pick from this list.
Exactly, yeah. For me, I think just like everyone else in Silicon Valley, I'm just trying to make the world a better place. It's so funny.
Michael, we know you too well.
Cue the laugh track? Is that
No, I hit 20 years in recruiting in March, and it did cause a lot of introspection for myself on why do we do this work and what's the ultimate purpose, right? To just help companies grow, or to do fun work, or to help people. And for me, it really does. It always keeps coming back to, I don't always love the guts of the work every single day, but ultimately, when we're in the people business, we're helping people. And if you can do that a little bit each day, like you're making a little bit of a dent, and that keeps me going.
It's so incredible how we're all in this space and we all bring something different to the table. I love that about this group. For us, my goal is simply to add value. So every time I have a conversation with someone, and anyone on my team has a conversation with someone, it's about giving value. That's the goal. So if I'm...
You're pretty good at it, by the way.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. I love this group. I'll pay you $20 later. I think what that means is when I'm talking to somebody about something, I'm not attached to a specific outcome. It would be lovely to have a deal emerge from a conversation like that, but it might be, hey, I have an article that I want you to read, or hey, have you thought about this? So an idea, or a referral to somebody else. The idea is always, what value are we adding in this moment that when we get off a call with somebody, that things will be better in some way, or they'll have an opportunity to do something they hadn't tried before. And I think it sort of emerged for me, initially it was, I'm chasing a title. I want to check these boxes. And what I've realized now is I just want to add value. And it's changed everything. It's changed my interactions with my family. It's changed how I react when the kids kind of go off the rails a little bit or a lot. It's changed the way I think about my interactions. So during this pandemic, when we were initially housebound, I decided to use my morning commute time to talk to my parents. And I ended up recording hours and hours of them telling our family stories. First my dad, then my mom, and then the two of them together from the time they met, like telling the stories. And these are stories I've heard for many, many, many years, my whole life. But there was something important and special about the connection that happened in that. And it sort of gave me courage. And I've ended up reconnecting over the past 3 years with people that I haven't talked to or worked with in 10 plus years. I've had people reach out of the blue, and these are conversations that we have. And it connects you to what matters. And maybe it's wisdom and age now that's brought me to this realization. But I think that to the extent that we're able to connect with each other and make a difference and share our purpose with each other, that's what makes things incredibly special. It makes it worth it.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. I'd love to hear more about those stories. You told me about that back in Vegas. You had that project going.
Yeah, and my dad passed away in February.
Yeah, it's
so
good timing for you to work on that.
Got to write a book. Write the
Awesome.
book. Yeah. But, tell me a little bit about how you've built community. There's a big people and talent community around the globe, and we've all got connections and are tapped into many of these different kinds of communities. How do we contribute? How do we keep building community and invite more perspectives in?
Well, I think community done well, at least one aspect of it, is lifting each other up. One thing we're doing right now, because we're in the recession, if you will, I'm giving you the quotes all the time. Is that there are some real struggles out there that exist outside of what we typically do. But it doesn't mean we don't have some sort of experience or know somebody that can help that person. And being part of a community doesn't mean being the person that benefits every time. It's contributing as well. And I think from a global community, especially in the times that we're in now that with remote and how spread out we are, but then at the same time very connected, at least maybe not physically, community is key. And I'd say for anyone that is looking to figure out what they're going to do the next thing in life, right? Some things we talked about in previous episodes of what makes you happy and things like that. Find the community, kind of like that love that you have, and where is it where you can contribute, take part, benefit from it. I think it's central to everything you want to do, and in obviously the professional side of it, which is great, but also helps a lot in personal as well. Especially the parent side of things we talk about, how many mom groups or dad groups have we been part of to simply just get through things we didn't have any sort of formal training around. We contributed, we took from it. And I think that's paramount right now when we have this slowdown, this opportunity to reach out and to be part of a community.
Yeah, I think we're all four of us are part of one community together, and we're probably all part of lots of other communities. And I think when I look at the communities that in my time that I feel like I've gained value from, that I've learned from, that's helped me grow in one way or another, there's a lot of commonalities there. And I think one of the things that is there's some sort of shared interest, some sort of shared vision, purpose, whatever it is. And there's a very light structure around it and a lot of freedom within that structure to contribute, to express, to collaborate, to come together, and there's not a lot of rules per se. It's we all have a shared thought, we all have a shared feeling, we all have dads, moms, whatever, and it could be working dad, whatever it is, and there's not a lot of structure. And people have freedom to be able to kind of express themselves however they want. Within Rocket Power, we have Slack, and we've created a bunch of Slack communities, and it was started just with a couple, and it was around. Initially, some of them were very tactical, like how to be better at sourcing, or how to be better at client-facing interactions, or how to be better around, using data to both manage yourself and also manage your client expectations, things like that. But then it started growing into other non-work-related things, and just following that structure, where it's very loose. There's one or two people that are looking after it to make sure that the right things are happening, the right type of conversations, or I shouldn't say conversations, but the things are happening in there, and that they're encouraging conversation. What we see now is other communities are springing up because they see these other things, and so we've created this safe space for people to create communities, and we don't have a lot of rules around it. It's very much like be respectful of of the people in the community, respect opinions, treat them well, and outside of that, be free to create these communities. And I think for me, those type of communities that I've been part of that have that structure have always worked well. And some I feel like I don't contribute value to. I feel like I get more value out of than I'm actually contributing, and that's okay, because there's times when I know that I've dropped in and created some value. And I think that's actually another sign is I do think the most valuable communities I've been part of are the ones where I'm learning more than I'm teaching. And when you have a bunch of people involved in a community, that should be the case. There should not be one dominant voice. So yeah, if you can create a community like the one that we're part of, or others, where they have that structure, it usually ends up being pretty valuable for people.
And that value can go a few different ways. I think in the last 4 or 5 years, there's probably 3, maybe 4 different communities I'm relatively active with. And I've also interviewed a ton of chief people officers and VP people and other executives in the HR space, probably 300 in the last 3 years.
I was going to say a ton, or a whole lot, a whole lot more than a ton, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. And what almost all of them share is it's a really lonely job. And I think any executive role is like that. Being an entrepreneur is also a really the buck stops here, right? But in those communities, you're with other people that are facing the same issues, and you can just share, and it's just so powerful. And it's something I didn't even think I realized it was a thing until 4 or 5 years ago.
You were probably part of them before, but you didn't realize you were part of them.
Probably, yeah,
in a different way.
Right, yeah. Maybe not realizing the value of it, or really maybe even taking it for granted, right?
Yeah.
But it is so powerful to be part of that, and I think this is where I do feel technology is actually great. It's helping people connect all over the world. I talk to people, so many, like I have one friend in Africa, one friend in Indonesia, and they're facing the same problems we are, and just talking about them and sharing different ideas to solve them it's just fun. It's great.
I think ultimately it's about connection, right? This is part of what makes us human, that we are a part of communities, and to the degree that we have more and more awareness about ourselves, we can contribute and we can receive. And it's that exchange that's not an even exchange. Sometimes we receive more than we contribute, and sometimes it's the opposite. But that opportunity to be in community with each other is what is so enriching for us all. And I'm so delighted to be in community with all of you. So thank you so much. This has been really great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Wonderful.